Greetings, my scattered brothers and sisters in the Lord. Trust you know the Lord is with you today, wherever you find yourself scattered, and that you know that His presence with you is more than enough for whatever you might face today. We are continuing on in the Gospel of Mark. We're in chapter 16, and we are now starting on the resurrection appearances of Jesus. And you'll remember that we ended at 16:8 and with the empty tomb, and that was the kind of original ending of the Gospel of Mark, that the oldest manuscripts of the Gospel of Mark that we have, they stop at 16:8, and there's no account of the resurrection appearances of Jesus. There's just the news that Jesus is risen, and the word to the women to go and to tell the men that Jesus will meet you in Galilee. And so I want to pause for just a moment and consider, okay, how did we get, resurrection appearances added to the Gospel of Mark? Well, we don't actually know, but this is how my imagination works, that the Gospel of Mark would not have been published like we think of a book being published today, that was rare in those days. They didn't have printing presses. So anybody that had a copy of the Gospel of Mark, it was handmade. And that a pastor would have been incredibly blessed to have a copy of the Gospel of Mark, and that most church members would not have had a copy. And it's not like they had a copy on their phone. It's not like they had a copy, on their nightstand. They simply would have had to know the Gospel of Mark by hearing it. And many pastors would have known the Gospel of Mark by hearing it. And so I can just imagine kind of coming to the end of the Gospel of Mark, whether you're hearing it read, whether you're remembering it, whether it's been told to you, and just kind of thinking, okay, yeah, Jesus is risen, the tomb is empty, but kind of knowing the stories that Jesus had appeared to Mary Magdalene, that Jesus had appeared to the two on the Emmaus Road, that Jesus had appeared to the 11 and gave the Great Commission and then was ascended into heaven. And so I can just imagine that as they concluded Mark, they would go on to talk about the resurrection appearances of Jesus. And then at some point, somebody decided, well, I might as well write those down and add on to the Gospel of Mark that Jesus did appear to Mary Magdalene, that Jesus did appear to the two on the road in the country, that Jesus did appear to the 11 and give them the Great Commission. So I kind of see it just kind of naturally, organically happening to where we have the extension of the Gospel of Mark to include the appearances, the resurrection appearances of Jesus. Now let's go ahead and begin. We'll pick it up at 16:9. Now when Jesus rose early on the first day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, from whom he had cast out 7 demons. She went and told those who had been with him as they mourned and wept. But when they heard that he was alive and had been seen by her, they would not believe it. After these things, Jesus appeared in another form to 2 of them as they were walking into the country. And they went back and told the rest, but they did not believe them. Afterward, Jesus appeared to the 11 themselves as they were reclining at table. And he rebuked them for their unbelief and hardness of heart, because they had not believed those who saw him after he had risen. So we have Jesus appearing to Mary Magdalene, and she goes and reports to the disciples. They don't believe her. Jesus appears to the 2 on the Emmaus Road. They come back, they report. Mark just calls it a road in the country, but they come back, they report, and the disciples don't believe them. And so then Jesus shows up and meets the 11, and he rebukes them for their lack of faith. So I think we have a couple things going on here. One, we have the good news that Jesus is risen. But simultaneously, we have the frustrating report that the disciples don't believe. We're not talking about the world not believing. We're talking about those who had followed Jesus, those who had heard his teaching that he would be crucified and that he would be raised, that they saw the crucifixion. They're hearing the news that Jesus is risen, and they don't believe. And when Jesus shows up, he rebukes them for their lack of faith. And so I've been thinking about this, that I wonder if sometimes it's the church that's slowest to believe in the resurrection. Now, I know that as part of our beliefs, that Jesus died for our sins and he's risen, but I wonder how often we operate like we don't really believe, that we have lost, faith in the power of God. That here they are, they're still followers of Jesus, but they're going around head down, disappointed in their grief that Jesus has died, and they don't have the hope of the resurrection, even though Jesus had told them that he would rise. I wonder how often that's actually us, that we're followers of Jesus, but we don't live with a lot of faith, a lot of confidence in the power of God, and we don't live with a lot of hope, that we're just kind of following Jesus sadly, instead of following Jesus with the hope of resurrection and a confidence in the power of God, that not even death will stop God from working and accomplishing his saving, restoring, resurrection purposes. And so that's the word I would have for you today. It's the word I'm being challenged with. Am I following Jesus with the hope of resurrection? Am I following Jesus with confidence in the power of God to work beyond what I can understand? Or am I just kind of following Jesus head down sadly? And my prayer is that God would empower us with his Spirit to follow Jesus with confidence and the hope of the resurrection, and that God's power is at work to accomplish salvation, and that not even death will stand in the way. Well, God bless. Have a great day. Follow Jesus in the hope of the resurrection. Have a good day.